Most people think luxury aviation is about leather seats, polished wood, and gold-accented cabins. And yes, that luxury is very real. The moment you step inside a Gulfstream, the scale, the silence, and the design make one thing clear. This is expensive, intentional, and built for a very small circle. But what truly separates Gulfstream from every other private jet brand isn't just what you see inside the cabin, it's what happens around it. Over time, something unusual occurred. Among billionaires, heads of state, and the world's most powerful executives, Gulfstream stopped being a choice and became an assumption. Advisors stopped comparing alternatives. Buyers stopped explaining their decisions. In elite circles, Gulfstream quietly became the jet everyone expects you to fly. This didn't happen by accident. It wasn't driven by marketing alone, and it wasn't only about performance. It was the result of how luxury, economics, reliability, and elite psychology converged into a single brand, one that signals power without needing to announce it. This is the story of how Gulfstream became the default jet of the elite. Welcome to Jetonomics.
Before Gulfstream became a familiar name in elite circles, private aviation lacked a clear standard. Wealthy individuals could buy aircraft that were expensive, fast, or visually impressive, but those qualities did not always align in a single platform. Luxury aviation existed, but it was fragmented. Each jet represented a different compromise between comfort, range, reliability, and prestige. There was no unspoken rule about what the right aircraft was for the world's most powerful travelers. During this period, owning a private jet often required explanation. Buyers compared brands, justified trade-offs, and accepted limitations as part of the experience. A jet might offer an extravagant interior but struggle with long-range consistency. Another might deliver strong performance while lacking the presence expected in elite environments. Luxury was visible, but it was not yet standardized. This fragmentation created friction at the top of the market. As global business expanded and executive schedules became more complex, elites began to value consistency as much as opulence. Flying privately was no longer just about escaping commercial travel. It was about maintaining momentum across continents. A jet needed to look exceptional, feel exceptional, and perform exceptionally every time. At the same time, the economics of elite travel were changing. As fortunes grew and responsibilities multiplied, the cost of delays, missed connections, and unreliable reach became more visible. Time began to outweigh novelty. Reliability began to matter as much as design. Luxury was still expected, but it had to be dependable and repeatable. This is the environment in which the idea of a default began to form. The elite were no longer searching for the most interesting aircraft. They were searching for the least questionable one. The jet that would never need justification in a boardroom, at a private terminal, or among peers. When a brand could deliver that level of confidence, combining unmistakable luxury with predictable performance and economic logic, it stopped being evaluated like a product. It became a reference point. And once a reference point exists at the top, everyone else aligns around it. This shift set the stage for Gulfstream's rise, not as the flashiest option in the sky, but as the one luxury jet that gradually eliminated doubt, and in doing so, positioned itself to become the default.
Luxury in private aviation is not defined by a single moment. It is defined by repetition. A cabin can look spectacular once, but for the elite, true luxury is when that experience repeats flawlessly across years, routes, and aircraft. Gulfstream understood this early and built its brand around making luxury feel consistent rather than experimental. Step inside a Gulfstream cabin and the first impression is unmistakable. The space feels expansive, quiet, and intentionally designed. High-grade leather seating, precision-finished wood veneers, custom fabrics, and carefully balanced lighting create an environment that signals expense without hesitation. These interiors are not subtle by accident. They are meant to communicate status the moment the door closes. Flashy elements exist, but they are controlled, polished, and integrated into a broader sense of order. What sets Gulfstream apart is how repeatable this luxury feels. Owners and guests recognize the environment instantly. The cabin layout, the window design, the seating flow, and the overall atmosphere feel familiar across different Gulfstream models. This familiarity is powerful. It removes uncertainty and reinforces trust. Elite travelers know what they are walking into, and that predictability itself becomes a luxury. Behind this visual consistency is a disciplined economic strategy. Gulfstream invests heavily in standardizing high-end materials, craftsmanship, and cabin architecture across its lineup. Rather than chasing radically different interior concepts with each model, the brand refines a recognizable aesthetic. This reduces variation without reducing opulence, allowing luxury to scale without becoming chaotic. The result is a cabin that feels expensive in a way that does not need explanation. There is no sense of over-design or gimmickry. Everything feels deliberate, permanent, and validated by repetition. In elite circles, that matters. When a Gulfstream is parked on the ramp, no one questions its presence. The brand's luxury has already been socially approved. By making luxury look and feel consistent, Gulfstream did something rare. It transformed interior design from a personal statement into a shared elite language. And once luxury becomes a language everyone at the top understands, the brand that speaks it fluently gains a powerful advantage.
Luxury becomes fragile the moment it requires adjustment. A cabin can be beautifully designed, but if a journey involves refueling stops, delays, altitude fatigue, or unpredictable arrival times, the experience quickly loses its polish. Gulfstream understood that for the elite, true luxury is not only what happens inside the cabin, but how smoothly the entire journey unfolds from departure to arrival. This is where performance quietly elevates luxury. Gulfstream aircraft are built to fly farther, higher, and faster than most of their competitors, and those capabilities directly shape the onboard experience. Non-stop intercontinental range removes interruptions that break rhythm. High-speed cruise shortens time in transit. High-altitude flight avoids turbulence and crowded airspace. Each of these technical decisions translates into something the passenger feels: calm, continuity, and control. Inside the cabin, this performance shows up as effortlessness. Meetings continue without schedule anxiety. Rest feels uninterrupted. The atmosphere of luxury, the silence, the lighting, the comfort, remains intact for the entire journey. Flashy interiors only matter if they can be enjoyed without compromise, and Gulfstream's performance ensures that they are. There is also an economic logic beneath this smoothness. At the highest level, time lost in transit carries measurable cost. Delays ripple into missed opportunities, postponed decisions, and compressed agendas. By reducing variables in long-distance travel, Gulfstream aircraft protect not only comfort, but momentum. The jet becomes a stabilizing force in an otherwise unpredictable global schedule. Over time, this reliability reshaped expectations. Luxury was no longer defined by how extravagant a cabin looked on day one, but by how consistently the experience held up across years of heavy use. Elite travelers began to associate Gulfstream not just with premium interiors, but with journeys that simply worked, without explanations, workarounds, or apologies. This is how performance became invisible luxury. It did not replace visual opulence,
It supported it. It allowed the leather, the space, and the design to exist without friction. When everything functions seamlessly, luxury stops drawing attention to itself and starts feeling natural. And in elite environments, that naturalness is often the clearest signal that a brand truly belongs at the top. At the highest levels of wealth and influence, decisions are rarely made in isolation. Elites do not copy trends the way mass markets do, but they do observe each other closely. When a particular choice begins to repeat within a small, powerful circle, it sends a signal. In private aviation, that signal gradually pointed toward Gulfstream. This shift did not happen because one individual made a bold purchase. It happened because advisors, corporate boards, heads of state, and trusted operators began to converge on the same conclusion. Gulfstream became the aircraft that raised the fewest questions. When it appeared on a ramp or at a private terminal, its presence felt appropriate rather than exceptional. That social acceptance is one of the most valuable forms of luxury at the top. Once a brand reaches this stage, network effects take over. A familiar cabin becomes a shared environment. Guests know what to expect before they step inside. Crews recognize systems, layouts, and procedures. Operators understand maintenance standards and performance profiles. Each repetition reduces friction, making the brand safer to choose again. Economics reinforces this behavior. When a jet is widely adopted among peers, residual values stabilize, support networks expand, and operating knowledge deepens. Ownership begins to feel less like an isolated decision and more like entry into an established system. For elites who prioritize predictability, this matters as much as design or performance. There is also a psychological element at play. At the top, status is rarely communicated through novelty. It is communicated through alignment. Choosing what others in your circle already trust signals belonging and confidence. Gulfstream's growing presence among powerful individuals transformed it from a standout option into the expected one. Over time, this repetition removed the need for explanation. No one asked why a Gulfstream was chosen, it was assumed. And once a choice becomes assumed in elite environments, it gains a form of momentum that marketing alone cannot buy. This is how Gulfstream crossed a critical threshold. It stopped competing for attention and started benefiting from collective validation. Luxury became social proof. Economics provided reinforcement, and the brand quietly secured its position as the jet elites copied, until copying turned into default. At the top of the economic and political hierarchy, visibility is rarely an advantage. While wealth and influence attract attention, the ability to move quietly often determines how effectively that influence is exercised. In private aviation, privacy is not a secondary benefit of luxury. It is one of its core functions. Gulfstream recognized this and built its reputation around discretion as much as design. A Gulfstream cabin is visually impressive, but its true value often lies in what happens beyond sight. Controlled access, predictable scheduling, and reduced exposure transform travel into a private process rather than a public event. Unlike commercial aviation, where movement is visible and constrained by rigid systems, private flight allows timing and routing to align with individual priorities. Security extends beyond physical presence. Communication during travel carries economic and strategic weight. Gulfstream aircraft are equipped to support secure, encrypted connectivity, enabling sensitive discussions and real-time decision-making while airborne. For executives, investors, and heads of state, this capability is not a luxury add-on, it is essential infrastructure. There is also an economic dimension to privacy. Disruptions caused by unwanted attention, schedule interference, or security concerns introduce hidden costs. Delays cascade, plans compress, opportunities narrow.
By minimizing these variables, Gulfstream protects not just comfort, but continuity. Movement becomes reliable, and reliability preserves momentum. Quiet power rarely announces itself. In elite circles, discretion often signals greater authority than visibility. A Gulfstream parked discreetly at a private terminal communicates control without spectacle. It reflects a preference for systems that work without drawing attention, rather than displays that demand it. Over time, this association between Gulfstream and quiet power strengthened the brand's position. Luxury was no longer defined solely by what could be seen inside the cabin, but by the confidence of knowing that movement, communication, and timing remained under control. For those operating at the highest level, that confidence is one of the most expensive forms of luxury available.
Gulfstream did not become the default jet of the elite because it was the only brand offering luxury. Other manufacturers delivered beautiful cabins, advanced aircraft, and compelling designs. Bombardier, Dassault, and others all produced jets capable of impressive performance and refined interiors. On paper, the competition was strong. But at the very top of the market, being excellent was not enough. What separated Gulfstream was scale, not just in size or range, but in repeatability. Gulfstream aircraft delivered a luxury experience that could be relied upon across continents, fleets, and years of operation. While competitors often excelled in specific areas, Gulfstream built an ecosystem that functioned consistently at the highest level. This scale created economic advantages. A larger global support network meant faster maintenance, deeper operational knowledge, and more predictable ownership costs. Parts availability, service access, and standardized procedures reduced uncertainty for owners and operators. For elite buyers, this translated into confidence, a critical currency at the top. Luxury benefited from this structure. A beautifully designed interior only matters if it can be enjoyed without interruption. Gulfstream's global infrastructure protected that experience. Flights were less likely to be disrupted by support limitations, and long-range missions could be executed with fewer compromises. The cabin's opulence was reinforced by the assurance that everything behind the scenes would work. There was also a signaling effect. When elites observed that Gulfstream fleets were operating smoothly across regions and institutions, the brand gained credibility beyond marketing. It looked established, dependable, and socially validated. Scale became part of the luxury narrative. Competitors continued to innovate, and many produced exceptional aircraft, but Gulfstream's advantage lay in how its luxury could be deployed repeatedly, at scale, without requiring explanation. At the highest level, that reliability often outweighs novelty. In the end, Gulfstream did not win by being the most dramatic option. It won by being the most deployable one. And in elite environments, the ability to scale luxury without friction is often what transforms a premium product into a default choice.
At the highest levels of wealth, the most powerful position a brand can hold is not being the best, but being the default. Defaults reduce friction, they eliminate debate, they remove the need for justification. Gulfstream's rise to this position was not accidental. It was the result of economic forces reinforcing elite behavior over time. When a brand becomes the default among influential buyers, costs begin to stabilize. Residual values strengthen because demand remains consistent. Support infrastructure expands because operators invest where usage is predictable. Training, maintenance, and operational knowledge deepen, further reducing uncertainty for owners. Each layer of adoption reinforces the next, creating a self-sustaining economic loop. For elite buyers, this loop lowers risk. Purchasing a Gulfstream no longer feels like a bold decision, it feels conservative. Advisors are comfortable recommending it, boards are unlikely to question it. The economics of ownership become easier to defend because the market has already validated the choice.
In environments where reputation and accountability matter, this reassurance carries real value. Luxury benefits from this dynamic as well. A default luxury brand does not need to exaggerate. Its status is reinforced by ubiquity within a small, exclusive group. When everyone at the top recognizes the same signals, those signals become stronger, not weaker. Gulfstream's cabins, performance, and presence all gain meaning from this shared understanding. There is also a time advantage. Defaults accelerate decisions. When a choice no longer requires extensive comparison, execution speeds up. At scale, this saves not just money, but attention. In elite operations, attention is often more scarce than capital. This is the quiet economics behind Gulfstream's dominance. The brand did not simply sell aircraft, it sold certainty. By aligning luxury with predictability and economics with trust, Gulfstream positioned itself where alternatives felt unnecessary. Once a brand occupies that position, competitors face a steep challenge. They must not only match features or design, but overcome the comfort of the default. And at the top of the market, comfort, backed by economics, is one of the hardest forces to displace.
At a certain level, luxury stops being about comparison. It no longer needs to compete for attention or justify its price. It simply exists as part of the environment. That is where Gulfstream ultimately positioned itself, not as the loudest symbol of wealth, but as the one that never raises questions. The cabins are undeniably luxurious. The materials, space, and design communicate expense instantly. But what truly defines Gulfstream's status is how seamlessly that luxury fits into the economic and operational lives of the elite. The aircraft works quietly, consistently, and globally. It removes friction from movement, reduces uncertainty, and protects time, all while surrounding its occupants with unmistakable comfort. This balance is what transformed Gulfstream from a premium manufacturer into a default choice. Luxury created desire, economics reinforced confidence, elite psychology locked it in. Over time, the brand became something people expected to see in powerful spaces, rather than something they needed to notice. In the world of the ultra-wealthy, defaults are powerful. They signal alignment, credibility, and belonging. Gulfstream did not chase attention to achieve that position. It earned it by making luxury dependable and making economics invisible. That is the deeper story behind elite aviation. Not just what looks expensive, but why it stays expensive and why the same names keep appearing behind closed doors. If you enjoyed this breakdown of how luxury and economics intersect at the highest level, make sure to like this video and subscribe to Jetonomics. Here, we explore how power moves, how wealth scales, and why the world's elite make the choices they do.